A woman, in the darkest moment of her shattered marriage, resolutely embarked on a journey to a foreign land. She bought a dilapidated old castle in Tuscany, thinking it was an impulsive act. Yet she never imagined this adventure would become the starting point for healing her wounds and finding new life. Perhaps each of us needs such an escape, to rediscover the self lost to life amidst unfamiliar scenery. Frances Mays, a professor at a university in San Francisco, was also an accomplished poet. She thought she was the happiest woman in the world, yet at this stage of her life she suffered the double blow of a broken marriage and dried up inspiration. But her husband's betrayal instantly plunged her life into an abyss, making her seem to age overnight. Worse still, because her income was higher than her husband's, she not only had to pay substantial alimony, but also risked losing the house they owned together. Hearing this, Frances was incredulous, yet she had to accept this harsh reality. She nodded painfully, tears welling up in her eyes, her heart filled with despair. Frances contacted the movers, thinking this place would soon hold another couple's sweet sorrows, and she suddenly lost all attachment to the belongings. Maybe leaving them behind was the only way to avoid the painful reminders. In the end, she only packed a few boxes of books and one blue vase. She moved into a bachelor apartment where the environment was noisy, with the sound of a man weeping over his divorce proceedings often coming from next door. The landlord even joked that she could knock on the wall if the noise bothered her, but Frances had no mind for such jokes. After the landlord left, she collapsed directly onto the floor. That feeling of suddenly losing everything was like a heavy hammer blow to her heart, causing her unbearable agony. Just as Frances reached her lowest point, her best friend Patty extended a helping hand. Patty, being pregnant, couldn't travel to Tuscany, Italy as planned, so she decided to give the tickets to Frances, hoping this trip would help Frances emerge from the shadow of divorce and rediscover hope in life. At first, Frances wanted to refuse, trying to change the subject, unwilling to face her predicament. But Patty knew her too well and spoke bluntly.
I think you're in danger. Of never recovering. Well, there came a time in each one of those lives where they are standing at a crossroads.
Crossroads. God, that is so Oprah.
Some place where they had to decide to turn left or right. This is no time to be a chicken shit.
Patty's words were like a beam of light piercing Frances's dark world, making her begin to reflect on her own state. When Frances heard the despairing sobs of the man next door again, it was like seeing her future self. She didn't want to sink into despair like that, so she stopped hesitating and decisively called Patty. And so Frances, with a glimmer of hope for a new life, boarded the train to Italy. This decision would completely alter the course of her life. Upon arriving in Tuscany, the bustling marketplace instantly captured Frances's attention. The passionate and exuberant nature of the Italians also began to lift Frances's spirits, which had been shrouded in gloom. A lady wearing an extravagant hat was particularly eye-catching. She held a duckling in her palm and let it gently dab her cheek. That image of utter self-possession and ease inadvertently caught Frances's eye. Being a writer, Frances instinctively followed her, trying to learn the woman's story. But in a flash, the woman vanished into the bustling crowd. Frances continued wandering the streets when suddenly a property notice caught her eye. A villa named Bramasole was for sale. Just then, the elegant lady reappeared, telling Frances her home was near the villa. Although the villa was old, it would be quite nice to live in once fixed up. Although Frances felt a twinge of desire, she still thought she was just a tourist, and buying a villa was absurd, so she dismissed the idea. Afterwards, Frances got on a tour bus, expecting to continue her planned journey, but a flock of sheep suddenly blocking the road changed her fate. Bored, she glanced out the window, and to her surprise, the Bramasole villa she had been thinking about miraculously appeared before her eyes. Frances felt this might be fate. An impulse surged within her, and she immediately decided to get off the bus to see it. She entered the villa and found the owner, Contessa, negotiating the sale with a couple. Seeing Frances, Contessa immediately raised the price, angering the couple, who stormed out in frustration. Seeing this, Frances tentatively made an offer, but her price was far below Contessa's expectation, making a deal seem impossible. But just as Frances was about to leave in disappointment, something unexpected happened. The real estate agent Martini, seeing this, excitedly called out to Frances. Locally, this was considered an excellent omen, signifying good luck was coming. Miraculously, this made Contessa agree to sell the house to Frances at a low price. And so, Frances, somewhat bewilderedly, bought a villa in a foreign land, opening a brand new chapter in her life. But what awaited her was far from smooth sailing. The villa was dilapidated from long neglect, with non-functioning faucets, piles of empty wine bottles, and various insects. The renovation work far exceeded her expectations. She decided to make a plan, tidy up one bedroom to stay in temporarily, and slowly sort out the villa. That night, she called Patty and told her about the plan to settle in Tuscany. Patty could hardly believe it. Before she could ask for details, an approaching thunderstorm abruptly ended the call. Frances hurried back to the villa as heavy rain began to pour outside. The villa's aged windows couldn't withstand the storm, and rainwater kept pouring into the house. Worse, an owl, frightened by the storm, flew into the room, flapping around wildly. Frances was both scared and reluctant to shoo the owl away. She could only hide under the covers, shivering through the long night. After the stormy night, sunshine filled the world outside again. Frances was awakened by Martini knocking. The construction crews he had found were waiting downstairs. But Frances wasn't entirely satisfied with any of those workers, so Martini eventually brought over a team of Polish workers. Martini said that the foreman had worked on this old house when he was young, and after learning more, Frances felt that this team was the most reliable. The next day, the renovation work began immediately. But most workers were from Poland, and the language barrier meant they and Frances barely interacted beyond basic work communication. Whenever she had free time, Frances could only drink alone in the yard to ease her boredom. Yet that familiar sense of loneliness crept back into her heart, and she began to hope she could make some new friends. Frances noticed an elderly man came precisely every day with a bouquet of flowers to change the ones at the wall. She couldn't help but wonder if his lover was buried here, or if his beloved had passed away here, making him hold on to the memory so persistently. Frances gathered her courage to greet the old man, but he showed little interest in her, turning away coldly and leaving. Days passed one by one, and the villa renovation progressed with difficulty. Christmas approached in the blink of an eye, and the construction crew members returned home one after another to reunite with their families. To relieve her boredom, Frances went to help at her neighbor's olive grove, and the neighbor's family warmly invited her to join them for dinner. Coincidentally, the lady she had encountered at the market that day also appeared at the dinner table. Frances then learned her name was Catherine. During the meal, the gentleman seated beside Frances chatted pleasantly with her, even asking if she was single. Frances revealed she had recently become single again, but then an ambiguous hand suddenly rested on the man's shoulder. Frances realized the man was already married, but his flirtatious approach was hard for her conservative sensibilities to accept. Catherine, however, told her with a smile that in Italy, flirting is just a social courtesy, and one should simply enjoy the moment. As they grew more familiar over time, Frances finally got her wish to learn more about Catherine's past. In her youth, she had a romance with the famous director Fellini, and it was this experience that influenced her to live her life with such free-spirited ease ever since. Frances was deeply moved upon hearing this, and she hoped she could rediscover her passion for life, just like Catherine. Yet life is always full of surprises. That day, while Frances was cleaning the windows, a snake suddenly appeared and darted into the house, startling her into panic. She quickly called Martini for help, but they searched every corner and found nothing. Frances, worn down by prolonged loneliness, finally had an emotional breakdown. She had thought coming to Tuscany would let her escape past pain and start anew. But now, living alone in this vast empty house, she had no one to rely on when problems arose. This loneliness and helplessness made her even sadder. Martini warmly draped a blanket over her shoulders, then turned to get matches, intending to light the fireplace to warm her. She felt her life was a mess, and buying a house abroad was compounding the mistake.
This house has 3 bedrooms. What if there's never anyone to sleep in them? And the kitchen, what if there's never anyone to cook for? I wake up in the middle of the night thinking, you idiot. I mean, you're the stupidest woman in the world. You bought a house for a life you don't even have.
Why did you do it then?
Frances knew deep down she still held on to an expectation, hoping to hold a wedding on this land and rebuild a happy family. But what the future held, she had no clue. Martini patiently listened to her tearful outpouring, then told her a story. Between Austria and Italy, there is a treacherous stretch of mountains. In the past, no train could travel that route. Yet people laid the tracks anyway. undaunted by the difficulty because they firmly believed a train would pass through one day. Martini told her to stop being so sad. This story was like a warm light, illuminating the darkness within Frances. She realized she had already prepared so much for her new life. She couldn't just give up now. She would be like those who laid the tracks, moving forward bravely with hope. In the blink of an eye, Christmas arrived quietly. Amidst the town's festive celebrations, Frances ran into Martini once more. Martini handed her a boxed Christmas gift. "This is the famous Italian chef everyone loves." He told Frances that as long as she sincerely made a wish, she wouldn't lack people to taste her cooking. This encounter also let Frances see Martini's warm and happy family. True to Martini's words, after Frances made her sincere wish, diners came one after another, and everyone praised the dishes she prepared highly. Meanwhile, the house renovation steadily progressed. Plates of aromatic, delicious food became the bond that brought them closer. Even the usually silent electrician started talking freely. These comforting and heartwarming flavors quietly filled their ordinary days. Learning that Pavel, like herself, had lost his parents early, Frances often took him to the movies and encouraged him to boldly pursue the girl he fancied. One day, Frances went to visit Catherine, and as she opened the door, she saw Catherine being affectionate with her partner. Frances quickly turned to leave.
You're sad. Vivi always said, regrets are a waste of time. They're the past crippling you in the present.
I just got here. I just walked in the
How
door.
are you ever going to be happy if you keep wallowing? When I was a little girl, I used to spend hours looking for ladybugs. Finally, I'd just give up and fall asleep in the grass. When I woke up, they were crawling all over me. So go work on your house and forget about it. I said, go!
I'm going!
Catherine once again pointed Frances in the right direction. But the path forward was still strewn with unknown challenges. That day, she traveled alone to Rome by bus, searching for an antique shop selling crystal lamp parts. Perhaps her own unique aura was too striking. Frances found herself followed by 3 enthusiastic strangers. Seeing she couldn't shake them off no matter what, in a moment of urgency, she grabbed a stranger beside her, stood on tiptoe, and kissed him. Seeing this, the 3 pursuers finally left in disappointment.
Wait, you just kissed me and now you're going?
Yes! I'm sorry.
She intended to slip away but noticed the man remained standing across the street, showing no sign of leaving. The man's chiseled features and deep eyes inexplicably drew Frances's gaze, so she simply ran back and asked him for help. The man's name was Marcello. He admitted he didn't know the antique shop Frances was looking for, but coincidentally, his brother also ran an antique shop, though it was a 2-hour drive away. But he could get there in an hour if he drove like crazy. After much hesitation, Frances got into Marcello's car. Before long, they arrived at his place. Marcello came from a large family. In truth, he had lied to Frances, as there was nothing here that she needed. But Frances didn't mind being lied to because the time she spent with this charming man was genuinely enjoyable. After dinner, Frances walked alone along the beach, and Marcello followed behind, his eyes full of desire. Frances sensed his stare and ducked behind a sunshade. They played hide-and-seek like children, and Marcello took the chance to circle behind Frances. When their eyes met, the temperature in the air quietly rose. Frances, adrift in loneliness for so long, ultimately couldn't resist the charm of this Italian playboy. Long-suppressed emotions broke through like a flood. Before leaving, they agreed to meet again at Marcello's place that weekend. That weekend, a radiant Frances appeared before Catherine. This time, Catherine finally saw her transformation.
Lovely. When do you see him again?
Tomorrow.
On Sunday morning, Frances, carefully groomed, was about to go to the beach to meet her boyfriend. She had just stepped out when she bumped into Patty, who had flown in from San Francisco to visit her. Seeing the smiling Frances before her, tears suddenly welled up in Patty's eyes. The grievances buried deep within her finally found an outlet.
Jesus, Francis. Oh, how do you do it? How do you ever breathe again?
Frances understood this heart-wrenching pain and knew Patty needed companionship most right then. So she had to postpone her date with the boyfriend. The crumbling walls were gradually repaired, and the rural life in Tuscany finally began to take shape. Frances discovered that the clogged faucet had surprisingly started dripping, But the problems she encountered were still endless. Patty called her to the bathroom, where water flushed from the toilet was steaming hot. The workers had mistakenly connected the hot water pipe. Even more absurdly, Powell and the neighbor's daughter Kiara were hiding in her room for a date, which infuriated Frances. Kiara, however, with red eyes, begged Frances to keep their secret. Due to different religious beliefs, Kiara's father firmly opposed her relationship with Pavel, who was Polish, and since the town was full of acquaintances, they could only meet secretly in the old house.
If I am not with her, I will die of a broken heart.
The pleading in Kiara's voice carried an utmost sincerity, the purest form of love. Frances seemed to see her younger self, equally stubborn for love, and ultimately chose to forgive. But Kiara visiting Frances's house frequently eventually aroused the neighbor's suspicion. Unable to figure it out, he approached Frances to ask what was going on. Frances could only make up an excuse on the spot to brush him off. On her way back, she saw her boyfriend Marcello standing at the front door, chatting with Patty, and she couldn't wait to call out his name and run toward him. But how could her legs outrun a car? In the end, she could only watch helplessly as the car sped away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a heart full of disappointment. Marcello left a letter. He was heading north to stay for a while, and in it, he mentioned dreaming of Frances in a white dress. This filled Frances with regret that she hadn't been able to see Marcello one last time before he left.
You could have faked labor at least.
I wouldn't have had to fake it.
Patty welcomed the arrival of her new baby. The arrival of this little life added so much vitality here. Frances's writing gradually improved. She could feel her long-lost self step by step returning to her. That day, Pavel came to see her.
We are finished.
Unknowingly, the renovation of the villa had finally come to an end. The plaque on the wall was inscribed with Polonia, their mark of glory. Everyone took a group photo under the newly built wall. Despite inevitable friction and unpleasantness along the way, this villa had long become a crystallization of their collective effort. Even more precious was the fact that the bond between them had long surpassed that of a mere employer-employee relationship. The construction crew also packed their bags, ready to head to the next project. Frances again didn't know whose meals to cook. She thought of asking Patty to go into town, but found everyone had their own happiness. Only she remained so alone. Just then, a sudden knock came at the door. She hurried to open it, but only saw the taillights of a delivery truck disappearing around the corner. It turned out the items shipped from the US had finally arrived. Opening the boxes, the blue vase she had taken was among them. Inside a cookbook, she found a photo with her ex-husband. Looking at the photo, she suddenly stopped dwelling on it. Frances went to find Catherine.
I have to buy a white dress.
Catherine understood immediately. This time, Frances didn't linger where she was. She was determined to pursue her own happiness. Frances, dressed in a white dress, looked even more radiant. The confidence and elegance radiating from her even prompted the young driver to offer her a free ride home. She smiled and declined. "I have a boyfriend." The scenery of Positano remained enchanting. But when Frances appeared before Marcello, he wasn't as delighted as she imagined. He even seemed distracted. Until a girl's voice suddenly called from upstairs, "Darling!" Only then did Frances understand that after barely 2 weeks apart, Marcello's heart was no longer with her. After all, being naturally free-spirited and passionate, why would he wait for a delayed relationship? And in Italy, such things are perfectly normal. A dejected Frances returned to the town only to witness Catherine in a near-frantic display. She was dancing gracefully in the fountain, drawing a crowd of onlookers. Frances understood that Catherine was playing a role from some work, and according to the plot, only the appearance of the male lead could bring the scene to a close. Left with no choice, Martini reluctantly stepped in as the male lead, rescuing Catherine from the fountain. Upon questioning, Frances learned that Catherine's boyfriend had also just left her, but her resilient spirit allowed her to let go of the relationship quickly. No sooner had Frances returned to the villa than Patty informed her the young lovers were in trouble. But Frances, emotionally drained herself, truly had no heart to intervene. Returning to her room, she broke down, and in her chaotic state, she grabbed the blue vase she'd brought from America and smashed it to pieces. Just as she was feeling sorrowful, faint sobs drifted from the yard. It was Pavel and Kiara, locked in an embrace, crying. Clearly, their romance had met with fierce opposition from family. Frances looked at the tearful young couple and suddenly realized true love deserves blessings, so she made a decision. Encouraged by Frances, Pavel finally gathered the courage to ask Kiara's parents for her hand in marriage. but they firmly refused.
Won't you give your blessing? The real thing. A love that lasts forever.
What you describe is all in fairy tales.
No, it's not.
And how do you know? From personal experience?
No, I looked for it and I didn't find it. But that doesn't mean...
Io sì. Io l'ho trovato un grande amore.
Mamma.
Tuo padre.
With Frances and Chiara's grandmother advocating for them, her parents ultimately gave their consent to the marriage. On the wedding day, as Pavel's only family, Frances shed tears of joy, and the 2 wishes she had mentioned upon first arriving here were quietly fulfilled as time passed. Frances's dreams had come true, just in a different way.
And you said you wanted there to be a family here.
You're right. I got my wish. I got everything that I asked for.
She rested wearily on the lounge chair. Then a man, speaking in halting Italian, asked her, "Does an American writer live here?" Frances replied, "Perhaps I am the person you're looking for." The man reached out and gently removed a ladybug from her hand. Frances looked up. The man's face was handsome in the sunlight, his smile bright. She asked curiously if they knew each other. Ed smiled and said he had once received a harsh critique from Frances. Frances froze for a moment and said, "Had I known, I wouldn't have been so sharp with my words." Unexpectedly, Ed didn't complain. Instead, he said her critique was the most valuable advice he'd ever received, even inspiring him to write his second book. Knowing Frances was here, he had chosen to travel to this area. An unexpected encounter unfolded. Frances stopped seeking a response from the old man, simply watching his retreating figure in silence. This time, fate seemed to offer a gentle echo, as the old man actually paused, turned, and gave her a slight nod. Just a simple acknowledgement made Frances jump for joy. She finally understood that a house's meaning lies not in bricks and mortar, but in the emotional weight it carries. Time had smoothed out all the wrinkles. Frances had long learned how to make peace with life. What was once filled with the gloom of loneliness and disappointment now overflowed with the warmth of laughter and joy. She knew that in this beautiful land of Tuscany, she had not only found a warm home, but also gained true love and cherished friendship. Her once broken heart was now filled to the brim with love. By the film's end, Frances was utterly transformed. She had been deeply wounded by love and filled with confusion, yet on the magical soil of Tuscany, she rebuilt herself. The villa's restoration symbolized the healing of her inner wounds, and the deep bonds with the locals allowed her to embrace life anew. Though love had its ups and downs in the story, it wasn't the sole reason for her rebirth. She rediscovered her passion for writing, integrated into the local life, and found strength within herself. It shows us that life is full of the unknown, and setbacks are the norm. But we must, like Frances, carry courage and hope, actively reshape ourselves amidst adversity, and embrace the beautiful gifts life unexpectedly bestows.